Hi, everyone. Welcome to Presenting Art During COVID. My name is Kelly. I'm a professional development manager, program manager at Queens Council on the Arts. We're going to get started in about a minute or two, but as people are getting settled and signing on to the Zoom, would love for you to take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat. Feel free to just add your name, pronouns, discipline or organization, and social media handles if you all want to start connecting and following each other. Good to see some familiar faces. Good evening, everyone. Happy Tuesday. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Kelly Olshan. I'm a program manager at Queens Council on the Arts and will be moderating this session. As we're getting started, feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. And I am going to share a little bit of a PowerPoint just to get us started for this evening. Someone give me a thumbs up that you can see my screen. Awesome, thank you. Oh, here, hold on just a sec. Great. So good evening and welcome everyone to an event we're calling Presenting Art During COVID, Contingency Planning and Showcasing Work Online. There was a screenshot there of a digital performance by Matthew Shakila, who you're going to hear from tonight live in a couple of minutes. And essentially we wanted to put together a workshop that covers how to think about and tackle presenting work online. So to say a couple words about why we are virtually here as opposed to our forthcoming space in Long Island City, which we hope to be able to physically host you in a short time. You know, we at Queens Council on the Arts, and I think throughout our field are really facing this question of how do we do what we do digitally is something that artists, creatives, arts organizations are facing throughout the city and nationally, and certainly something that we at QCA and I personally have sort of struggled or been challenged to transition and been challenged to think about, you know, how we do what we do online. And so the spirit of this workshop is really to share what we've learned and share some best practices from a couple guest speakers as to how to present artwork online, how to think about contingency planning for your projects when everything can change at the drop of the hat, and try to enable you to hopefully walk away some concrete tools as to how you can think about planning virtual events and arts programming. So with that said, the general meeting agenda for this evening, I'm going to take you through just QCA at a glance, introduce you to our fabulous guest speakers, and then we'll get into the meat of the workshop. We're going to do kind of like a live streaming demo, talk about what this looks like from the artist's perspective, how one of our grantees has thought about transitioning a work that was intended to be online to the virtual space. And then finally, I'm going to share some learnings and some best practices around how to showcase visual artwork online. So just to give you a quick overview of QCA at a glance, I'm going to go through this pretty quickly because I think that if you're here, you're probably familiar with who we are and what we do. So we are the Borough Arts Council serving the entirety of Queens. We have these 4 key programs ranging from education, grants and residencies to creatives, special programs, and professional development, which you are attending now. So High School to Art School is our free visual arts portfolio development program for teens. The goal of this program is to provide students with the art skills training and college application assistance they need to get into the art school of their dreams, ideally with a scholarship. We are accepting applications for our spring program, which is like an introduction to portfolio development. Um, all juniors and sophomores living in the greater New York City area are eligible. So if you know someone who fits that description, please send them our way and encourage them to apply by February 7th. We have a host of grants and residency programs available for artists. Of course, our flagship program, the Queen's Arts Fund, my apologies, should have an S after arts, that offers artist grants for both individuals and organizations. Our 2021 applications are open and due January 24th, so coming up, offering organizations up to 5K and individual artists up to 3K. Oh, and just to say for the Queen's Art Fund, we're going to speak a little bit specifically about how to answer the contingency planning question associated with this year's application. So if you're applying to the Queen's Art Fund, this is for you. SUCASA is our artist residency program pairing artists in senior centers to improve their quality of life. We'll be announcing those applications soon. Our artist commissioning program is our formerly awarded $10,000 for individual artists. The goal of this program was really to democratize the traditional commissioning process by enabling local community members to commission art and enabling artists to create projects that tell untold stories that resonate with Queens communities. We'll be announcing the next iteration of that program in the spring. And without further ado, I want to introduce you to our two guest speakers for the evening. I'm gonna pull up a slide with all of their bio information and just ask them to verbally introduce themselves. So first, I am really pleased to have Matthew Shakile here. Matthew has been associated with our ACP and Queen's Art Fund. Matt, can you introduce yourself and say a few words about your affiliation with QCA?
Sure. Hi all. Matthew Shickley, and oh, it says it right at the top, writes music and words. I write mainly chamber music and electronic music and songs. And I got the artist commissioning program grant. Well, I mean, the easiest way to put it is right before COVID. It is basically when it started, and honestly, it really helped center me through the entire last year. It was a lot of work and very exciting, and I met a lot of awesome people. And later on, I'll be talking a little bit about my experience with that, show you a brief clip from the project, and then we'll be taking questions at the end.
Awesome, thanks, Matt. Next, I am pleased to introduce you. Oh, I'm sorry. I have a slide a little bit speaking about the oldest takeout in Queens. Matt, if you want to say a few words about your project.
Sure. The basic idea was it's a multi-movement piece for one singer, and the idea is that it's a fictional restaurant that opens around 1910 in Ridgewood, Queens. And then it goes, each movement takes place further in time until approximately the present. And ultimately the idea is that it's a celebration of language, because as new people come to the neighborhood from around the world, there are all these different languages that are spoken. And so each movement is the restaurateur interacting with someone speaking yet another new language. So there are about 18 movements in all, I think approximately 18 languages. And I think that's probably about it, right, Kelly?
Yeah, we'll say a little bit more about this later, but yeah, perfect introductory synopsis. Thanks, Matt. And now I'm pleased to introduce our next guest speaker, Mary Ellen Stemmons.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mary Ellen. I'm a lighting designer, and I've lived in New York for about 10 years now. And of course, I joined the ACP family as an art commissioner for this year's cycle. And of course, then COVID happened. And so I decided to translate my technical skill set into learning how to do video events. So that's sort of how I'm here. I do teach at Carnegie Mellon currently. And I'm really excited to talk about some technical things because I think that there are a lot of perceived barriers to being able to hold a really successful online event. And I'd love to talk a little bit with everybody about how we can get rid of those barriers and become more savvy. So excited to demonstrate some of it a little bit later.
Amazing. Thanks, Mary Ellen. So I also wanted to add that Mary Ellen is partly here because she helped digitally produce our artist commissioning program live series. And so she was really instrumental to helping QCA figure out, okay, how do we do this program that was supposed to be neighborhood based, supposed to take place in person with staged productions to the digital world. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about how we were able to live stream these conversations and world premieres to YouTube, to Facebook, how that informed the creative process, and offer some tips as to how you all can think about this in your own work and communities. So it's just a brief recap where, we hope you can walk away with some thoughts as to how to contingency plan and how to showcase your work online. So that brings us to the next part of the agenda, where we're really going to launch into a conversation about how to present performing artwork online, followed by a live streaming demo. So here we go. I'm going to stop my screen share and transition into sort of a conversation to introduce this concept of where we were in this moment of creating the ACP Live program. I would recommend that you all can, on the top right-hand corner, hit speaker view if you sort of want to follow along the conversation as opposed to seeing everyone at once. So, Mary Ellen, if you want to go ahead and dive in, I think that it might be helpful to sort of put us back where we were during the height of the pandemic, right? Where we were thinking about, we had this cohort of artists who where we wanted to showcase their work online. And we're thinking about, how do we do that? What is the best way to approach it? And that's really where we started this conversation, and where you sort of so valiantly stepped in to assist and think through this problem with QCA. Yep, you're on mute.
There we go. I do that all the time when I'm teaching. My students are always, you're muted. Yeah, Kelly, we had this conversation about, okay, with everybody actually, which is, we can't meet. This is a program about connecting to the neighborhood. This is a program about showcasing artists. We have this work in progress idea. How can we best represent it in a way that allows us to do right by the artist, to involve the neighborhood partners that we are interested in, to present the work in a way that's accessible but isn't overwhelming. It doesn't put too much pressure on the artist to do performance in an online setting that they may not be prepared or excited about. And you sort of came to me with some parameters, because I said, I do some online things. I think I can figure this out. And you sort of came to me with some parameters that I think identifying the goals of what do we need to happen and what are our limitations is actually where we started. And I think, the biggest one that you came to me with was, we don't want to put any pressure on our artists or our guest speakers to have to learn a bunch of software or get a bunch of complicated stuff or figure out new programs. And so that was sort of where we started with, how do we make accessible online events that people can be comfortable participating in?
Yeah, I think the challenge that I was in as a program manager that I think a lot of people could relate to was, okay, I need to transition. We want to create something that feels organic and engaging. There was this call from the art commissioners to say, well, we want to see works in progress. We want to hear from people and make it feel local and make it feel like we're in the room. But I also felt like there was already so much of a sort of stress and burden on artists in this time that I didn't want to put more work on them, given that, you know, the amount of money we're granting didn't change. So the amount of work that they're asked to do shouldn't change. And I think the other thing that I said to you originally was, okay, Queens Council of the Arts is we're not a presenting organization. We're not Lincoln Center. We're not even Queens Theater. We don't have a bunch of fancy sound, like bells and whistles. Like, what this is about is really like working with what we have and creating an engaging in process series. So I think that's where we started. I think I was thinking back to, like, I think my first question to you to help figure this out was, should this thing be live or should it be pre-recorded? How do we think about that, and what are the benefits and drawbacks of each?
Yeah, we talked about that a lot, because I think that one of the things about a streaming event is that live can mean a lot of different things. And so there's the issue of, okay, we're streaming it, so like this conversation, you've got to log on at a certain time to see it, and it might be recorded afterwards, but if you're not there when it's happening, you're not part of the live experience. You can't talk in the chat, you can't respond to other people's comments, etc. But the actual content that's being streamed doesn't actually have to be live. And in a lot of cases, it might not behoove you as a presenting organization or an artist to make that live. And so one of the things that to answer that question, I think any sort of organization or artist has to ask, what are we looking for out of our live experience? Is it that we want our participants to be able to chat and ask questions and answer them in real time? Is it that we actually want to say, this is happening right now, it's never happened before? Or is it somewhere in between? And I think for ACP Live, we came down somewhere in between. We said, it's important for us that our audience be able to put questions in the chat and that our panelists can answer those questions. It's important for us that the people participating on our panel be responding in real time, that it's not rehearsed or edited. However, it's also important that our artists be able to present something that looks good and polished, and that we don't have to say, you've got to perform on your Zoom, and you've got to talk about your work, and you've got to switch back and forth every 5 minutes. Right. So we came to the solution that we want to create a workflow and a process that allows our artists to make something ahead of time that they feel is succinct, beautiful, sound quality is great, framing is great, and that the panelists can then respond in real time. So that's how we sort of started with, okay, we need to use Zoom as our basic format, but we need a way to incorporate pre-recorded content. And so I think if you're an artist thinking about presenting work, I don't think it's a cop-out to say, I pre-recorded this and I'm streaming it live. That actually could be your best chance at a good presentation. And as all of our artists at ACP Live expressed, it can be stressful to have to go from performer to advocate to panelist, you know, and in a format like ACP Live, where the goal was, show us where you are in your process, talk about what's next. That was asking a lot of our artists. And as a result, I think our artists took that and ran with it and said, oh, I can produce a little music video, or I can do this really cool thing in my studio. And then we can just drop it into this conversation. And I'm free to engage as an artist and talk about the work. So that's the first question I think you have to ask yourself, which is, what is liveness, and like, what does it mean for you? And sort of along with this, the second question I think is like, what is your content? We talked a lot about this. You know, if you're an artist, then, you know, if you're projecting painting or you're projecting sculpture, what's really important is an image, a really good quality image. You know, if you're making a film, you want high resolution graphics, you want good sound. If you're a composer, sound might be the most important thing. And so this also comes into that conversation about pre-recorded versus live. How do you make sure you package your content so that you're presenting your best shot forward? If you're trying to do music, live could be problematic. Actually, live could be problematic because of a lag, whereas a pre-recorded section would allow people to view it afterwards or view it ahead of time or present something that's sonically balanced. So those sort of two questions we talked about a lot. And I think answering those questions for us gave our artist a clear directive of, I can make something really fantastic in a small package, and then have a conversation.
Right.
It might be different for someone else's event. The answer to that question really depends on how you want to go forward.
Yeah, I think that's right, though. For us, and I think probably for a lot of people listening, the benefits of having pre-recorded content was, one, it eliminates the stress. You can get everything perfectly squared away ahead of time. Two, you can really hone in terms of the quality. So for example, like as Matt will talk about later, as a musician, for him, the most important thing is the audio quality. And so making sure that those things are squared away ahead of time. Yeah, and finally, just as you said, like taking the burden off the artist so that they can toggle between speaking about their work live and the pre-recorded content. Another thing that was cool that I didn't even realize until we did this was that if the content is pre-recorded, you can have the performers and the artists and the creators literally in conversation with the artists while they're watching the show. Like that is not something that would be feasible in a traditional performance. It's not as if you can watch a choreography and then be in conversation with the choreographer as you watch it. So that was like a cool way of, and a different way of engaging people that wouldn't be possible in person.
Yeah. And I think the last question sort of, I have these like 3 big picture questions that like this idea of what is liveness? What do you need out of a live event? And what are the different versions of that? The second question being, what is the content you're presenting and how do you make sure you're putting that at the forefront? And then this third question, which is, what do you need to prepare to be successful? And I think for us at ACP Live, that was taking a real hard look at who's on our team. You know, we don't have a video producer. We don't have an audio producer. We have the art commissioners. We have me. We have the artist. And so how do we create something manageable that's repeatable? Because we had 4 events. So we wanted to create a consistent, repeatable thing that we could all learn as a group, that wasn't too much of an extra burden, but produced a professional product that we could be proud of. And that when it was recorded, the artist could then take and share it with other people or other applications, you know, things like that. So with those sort of 3 questions in mind, I'm going to share my screen. I sort of made a little presentation of how we did it. And I want to stress that something that we talked about when we were prepping for this seminar is that it really is like choose your own adventure. You have to answer those questions about liveness and content and what your tools and limitations are for your own event. This is what we did, how we answered those questions and got to the answer that we rolled with, but it might not be right for your event. In fact, it probably isn't, because your event will be different from the one we did. So there's no right answer. I just hope that this little walkthrough of the software we used and how it all works together will give you a sense of what's possible. I'll also say that most of the stuff I'm showing you how to use is free or for a very low price. So this sort of thing is affordable if you're just someone on a shoestring budget. It's also affordable if you're someone with an organization behind you. So I'm going to share my screen now. And so can everyone see my little thing? Okay, so basically, just as these are our questions that we asked, you know, what is liveness and what does it mean for our event? And just to reiterate, for ACP Live, we wanted real-time panel discussions. We wanted to be able to respond to the chat, but we wanted the artist not to have the burden of performing live. And then for an important thing about our content, we cared about image and sound quality. We cared about a casual discussion-friendly atmosphere, like in a Zoom meeting, and we cared about branding because we were working with community partners. We wanted people to know that it isn't just QCA, but it was also Supermoon Art Center or other societies, that we wanted to make sure that those organizations were represented properly in the content. And in order to be successful, we sort of decided like 4 things, right? That we wanted it to be clear. We wanted to be able to rehearse it with everyone ahead of time. but we wanted the artist to be able to preview what the event would look like and give feedback. How will my work look like on YouTube? What will the framing be? Will I look good? Will I sound good? We wanted a consistent, repeatable workflow that applied to all 4 events. And we wanted a system that integrated with Zoom so that everyone participating in our event didn't have to learn new software, buy anything, spend time stressful about something they weren't consistent with. Because basically everybody is comfortable at this point with some sort of Zoom or Microsoft Teams or Skype format. So we basically created the following sort of thing. So I'm going to show you a clip from one of our ACP live presentations if you didn't see it. This is Jamie Sun Woo's presentation, and it shows sort of 3 modes of presentation. It shows pre-recorded content, live panel discussion, and sort of a hybrid model. You'll see that there's branding here that we were able to overlay during our software. And this is actually a recording from the YouTube that is still available to watch online. So I'm gonna play it so you can get a sense of what it looked like if you're not familiar.
But we must reunite.
Well, I will see them again.
I have to survive this war.
So that was some pre-recorded content that the artist sent ahead of time of previous work.
With this clip, I found it especially heartening when this scene ends with a wish from both Jamie's grandmother and the American soldier that they really wish they could reunite with their family members again.
And you can see that this is a Zoom call with 6 people, one of which who is the artist, Jamie Sun Woo, at the top right-hand corner. And you can see that we're taking advantage of Zoom's closed captioning software to provide live closed captioning. We had a woman on the call whose video was not on who was doing that. Another thing that you can take advantage of if you use Zoom, for the pre-recorded content, we inserted the captions ahead of time. This event was broadcast to an audience that included Korean speakers. We wanted to make sure that it was equally accessible. So just another thing that we wanted to integrate in our format.
For me,
I skip ahead. This is an example of some integrated live and pre-recorded.
We chat on the phone. I have to visit her more often. My dad's parents stayed in Korea.
So that is pre-recorded content, the photographs that I was able to control from my end, and Jamie speaking live within the Zoom call, reading part of her script. So that's sort of the gamut of the types of things we wanted to be able to do. And here's how we achieved that. So this is our workflow, which I thought would be helpful to show everybody, the software we use and how we put it together. Again, we have pre-recorded content that the artist gave us ahead of time. We had participants in a live Zoom call. Again, the free version of Zoom, as I'm sure you are all aware, allows you 40 minutes of a meeting time. We were using a professional version, has a few more features, but not necessary to do a live streaming performance. And then a program called Loopback, which allows me to isolate my audio, my speaking audio, from the Zoom audio. So I can act as a sort of stage manager in the call, speak to the participants live, but my voice doesn't go out over the stream. So for instance, I could say, it's time for you to start speaking, speak now. And that wouldn't get recorded into the stream, but the participants would hear me. That program is $99. I know it's a little bit of a price tag. However, it's the best program out there for a Mac user who has no audio knowledge. There are Windows programs. I'm not as familiar with them, but if you Google the equivalent, it'll come up. I'll show you how to use this in a second. It was really important because I was able to control the flow of the conversation, and we were able to use Zoom as a virtual green room. So when the pre-recorded content was playing, I could prepare the panelists, okay, in 5 seconds, you're gonna be live again and talking. And Loopback allowed me to do that. And then we used open broadcaster software, which you may be familiar with, OBS, completely free program, does amazing things, downloads for Mac or Windows, is really fantastic. If you've ever watched a film shoot or a TV show, you know that if you have multiple cameras, you might switch from camera 1 to camera 2 and back again to camera 1. You can think about our pre-recorded content the same way. So the pre-recorded content was camera 1, the live Zoom call was camera 2, and using OBS, I could switch which content was going out on the stream. I'll demonstrate how to use that as well in a second, but that's what we used. Again, completely free program, and you can easily learn yourself. There's also YouTube videos about it. The other part of the process that we used was a program called Restream. Again, it's free at the base level. You can pay for more access for more functions. Works on macro windows. It enables you to stream on multiple platforms. So since we had community partners, we often wanted to stream on YouTube and Facebook Live at the same time, or multiple YouTube accounts. This is only possible if you use sort of a broker program like Restream. And then from there, we were able to broadcast to YouTube or Facebook Live. We personally didn't broadcast to Instagram because the size of the picture of Instagram is different. It's not industry standard compared to all other programs. So whereas everything else is a rectangle, Instagram is a square. So it usually doesn't work very well to broadcast off both platforms if you care about the image shape, which we did for a lot of our pieces. So again, I think Kelly will post this later, but feel free to screenshot this. This is just a sense of, these are the programs we used. Again, with the exception of Loopback, all of these programs can be completely free depending on how many features you want to use. So something good to know, it doesn't cost an arm and a leg to get yourself set up well. My setup, as the person running the stream, I volunteered to do this. I had 2 monitors. So as you can see on the right-hand side, I had a Zoom call where I could be present with the panelists the whole time. And on the left-hand side, I had my monitor running OBS and Restream, my broadcasting software. So I could sort of see everything at one time. That's how I chose to set it up. If you do want to run a stream, I would recommend a second monitor. If you have the ability, it makes things a lot easier. Not necessary, of course, but it's much easier. So I'm going to show you a demo of how OBS works in case you're interested. This may be too technical for some people on this call, and that's okay. I just wanted to show the workflow in case it was something that people were curious about. So I'll walk you through this. This is my home screen. As you can see, I'm currently in a meeting. Right now, this is my Zoom. On my other monitor, which you can't see in the screen recording, is the Zoom call itself, but you'll see how it works. So I open up my OBS program that when you open it up, it looks like this. And as you can see on the left-hand side, it says scenes. And then in the middle, it says sources. So if I click on the plus sign, I can make a new scene, which I'm going to do in the video. And then here's my Loopback program. So my Loopback program creates virtual microphones. So since I have Zoom open, I can start by establishing my Zoom audio feed. And so what I do is I make a new virtual device, which is called Loopback Audio. And then I add a source over here on the right. I go down and I pick Zoom because it's a window open on my computer. I delete this pass-through because I don't need it. And so now when I'm talking, you can see that the thing is moving. So that basically is my computer taking my Zoom audio. And so now it's isolated from my own microphone, so I don't have to be captured in the Zoom. This is how Loopback works. If you have more technical questions about it, I'm happy to answer them. Then I go back to, so that's how Loopback works. I made this video trying to talk with myself. Then I go back into my OBS. Eventually I do that, I think. Yes. And I can add sources. So within my new scene, which I'm making, which I'm calling my demo test scene, you can see I've just made it on the left-hand side, and I can add sources. So think of this as like telling your camera to get ready. So this is me adding camera 1, basically. And I'm saying, okay, I want you to take my Zoom call full screen. So I do what's called a screen capture or display capture in OBS. I pick my Zoom call. You can see my husband there who's modeling for me. I can resize the window to fit it how I want. I can crop the window to get rid of things I don't want. I can add in my, my audio that I've made through Loopback. If you see, if I click here, Zoom call audio, which I made in Loopback, is present. I can click on it. And that microphone, I go here and I make sure that it's going to Loopback here. I click on Loopback. And so now you can see that my microphone, which is labeled Mess Audio, is not activated, even though the Zoom call audio is, because it's separated. And you can see that that's the name of that. So you could rename that to anything you wanted. So this is basically how you would set up your OBS. And you can make multiple scenes. So one of your scenes could be pre-recorded content. One of your scenes could be the live video capture. So this is how we set it up. So I was able to flip between, so here's me making another scene. You can see when I click on that scene, it looks different. And that's how I was able to switch between them. It's a pretty simple video switching program, but that's how it functions. So again, this is a pretty technical video, but I hope it will be helpful. If you choose to download these programs, you can follow along with the video and see how I did it. It's pretty simple. Other than that, if you look on the right-hand side, you'll see that there's several things under controls that say start streaming, start recording, studio mode, and settings. You can record what you're streaming directly to your laptop if you wanted to have a hard recording of it. And then the settings is where you control how you stream, which I'm going to get to in a second. But this is how these two programs work. Again, I had no knowledge of these programs before I started. I downloaded the free OBS. I watched some YouTube videos. It's actually pretty simple. Any videos on your desktop or on your computer, you can add as a media source, and it works like that. So that's how those two programs work functionally. Once you set that up and you have your camera 1 idea and your camera 2 idea, you know, all of your content. So you might have 4 or 5 scenes depending on how much content you have. In our case, we had about 4. We had Kelly's introductory video, pre-recorded content, screen capture of the Zoom panel, and then a little animation that one of our commissioners made. If you want to stream on Facebook, I think most of us have seen Facebook Live videos at this point, but I wanted to highlight how you get to that issues on Facebook. So this is my Facebook profile. You'll see in the image on the left, if you click on live video, which I have the red arrow pointing to, it will take you to a screen that looks like the image on the right. And you have 2 options here. You can either go live now, which I think most of us have experienced, where just your camera, your phone starts recording you when you're walking around or in your car. Or you can do something called scheduling a live video event, which allows you to say, okay, I'm going to call this event ACP Live. I'm going to invite people. It's going to start at 10 p.m. on the 12th of January, and I'm going to invite people via Facebook. You can put a description. You can do all of those things. That's what we did, and I made a little short video walking you through what that looks like as well, if you're interested in following along. So this is my Facebook profile. I'm going to live video. It takes my computer a second to load because at this point I was running out of things. The first thing that you want to do is think about what you're going to do. So when this screen opens, if you notice it says get started and it says use stream key, use camera, use paired encoder. If you're working with a program like OBS, where you're compiling multiple sets of information and then switching between them, you're going to want to use a stream key, which I'll show you where to find that, because you'll record that stream key and give that information to OBS so that Facebook can see the content that you've created. Over here on the left-hand side, when I click schedule a live event, I'm going to click that in my video in a second, you'll see it comes up with event name, start date, start time, all things I can edit. I can add an image. I can invite people to this event. I can post it on my Facebook page. And you'll see here on the right-hand side where it says stream key setup, you see where it says stream key and it has this number and there's a button that says copy. That's the information you need for OBS. So you're going to click that button that says copy and get that stream key information. That's the only thing you need from this Facebook page to connect your OBS to Facebook, is that stream key information. So I go back to my OBS and I click on settings and I click stream and I select Facebook Live. OBS knows about the main platforms. I select Facebook Live and then I copy my stream key in there, and I usually check to make sure it matches, and it does, and then I'm set to go. So the moment I press start streaming on my OBS, it will connect to Facebook. But since I have scheduled the event, the content won't go live until the event is scheduled to go live. So my recommendation to you would be wait until about 2 minutes before your event, start your stream with a placeholder image or some, like a title card or some image that's not a video that you want people to see. And then when it's time for the event, you're ready to go. But they're connected now. And unless you change the stream key on Facebook or you delete it from your OBS, when you're ready to start streaming, it will stream. And with a pre-scheduled event on Facebook, it will go live automatically at the time that you have set. So all you have to do is press start streaming in OBS and you're set to go. That's how Facebook Live works. It's pretty intuitive, but I wanted to show everyone where all the steps were because it can be difficult to find them. The other common way to stream is YouTube Live. This is a slightly different process, so I wanted to show everyone these steps as well. This is my YouTube channel. If you look in the upper right-hand corner, this is where the picture, I don't have a picture on mine, but there's three icons next to your picture. There's the bell, the sort of like grid, and the little camera with a plus. If you click on that, it will give you two options, upload a video or go live. If you click go live, that's how you get to the page to manage setting up an event. And I have an example of that. So when you click go live, it will bring you to this screen called YouTube Studio. Don't be worried that it looks different from regular YouTube. There's reasons for this. It's just confusing. Don't worry, it's fine. On the right-hand side, you'll see there's three options, the sort of X-Wing Star Wars looking thing, the camera, and this little calendar. So when you click on manage, which is the lower right-hand side, left-hand side, it allows you to schedule an event. So much like Facebook, once you click on the manage function, my computer was very slow when I recorded this video, it will take you to this screen, which shows you all of the streams that I did in the past. And up in the right-hand corner, you'll see a blue button that says schedule stream. When you press that button, you can create new, you can choose to reuse settings. It takes you to a new event. And here's where you can enter your information, say what time, the date of the event. A really important thing to note, you have to select if the content is good for kids or not. YouTube forces you to. If you don't do that, it won't create the stream. It's part of their policy. If you select not made for kids, you're required to put in an age restriction. So be aware that content with profanity, you might need to select not made for children, and then there's going to be an age restriction. Users with that age restriction won't be able to see it. Once you click this in, I call it demo test stream. I can set if it's public or private or unlisted. So you can make an unlisted event that required a link to view, for instance, where people couldn't stumble upon your event. If you're trying to keep it private, I have to click no, it's not made for kids in my case, as an example, and I create my stream. And then once I do that, if I click on any of these information, so I'm going back to my stream, I need a new stream key here. I click on YouTube. It's important, It's important to note that YouTube has two settings. So let me just show this again because I want to make sure I'm doing it right. YouTube has two settings. If you see I'm in YouTube RMTP, that's the one you want to use as another server, but YouTube RMTP is what you need. And then if you go back into your, if I'm looking at this right here, once you set up your event, if you click on it on your manage page, you'll get this screen. And as you can see where it says stream key, there's a place where you can copy the default stream key variable and copy. That's where you get that information that you got from Facebook. Don't copy any of the other ones, you don't need them. And then up at the right-hand side, this little arrow up here on the right-hand side, top right-hand corner, that if you click that, that'll give you the link that you can send out in an email to show people how to share it. So that's basically how YouTube streams things and how Facebook Live streams things. I know it was like a lot of technical information, but I thought it would be helpful to walk people through where those things are. When I first started streaming, I had no idea where to find the stream key or how to even get to that window. And there's a lot of online tutorials that are very difficult to manage. The last thing that I just wanted to go through was I had Kelly send out a little like best practices sheet that I made, and I just wanted to go over it really quick. Some things that I've found in my work that are common questions or things that are difficult for people starting out. The first is people always ask me, I don't have a good camera, and that's fine. You don't have to have an amazing camera, because the point is that when you're streaming, the max quality you can stream on YouTube is 1080 pixels. That's well below what a movie plays on your high definition television. The max on Facebook is 720 pixels, and your audience is going to be limited by their bandwidth. So for most people watching a live event, they're watching it in 480 pixels. That's not a lot of pixels. Your cell phone camera shoots way more pixels than that. So yes, if you're pre-recording a film that then you want to put on YouTube, I would suggest a good camera. But if you're just a panelist or you're presenting in a Zoom play and you don't have the best camera, that's not a stumbling block. You should feel empowered to use your webcam, because the quality of the image that comes on the stream is not going to be that much better. The other thing to know is that there are apps out there, some are free, some are not, that allow you to connect your iPhone camera or your Android camera to your computer as a virtual webcam. The most popular of these is called EpoCam, E-P-O-C-A-M, and it allows you to use your camera. Your camera phone is way better quality than your computer webcam. It always is. They're made that way intentionally. So if you're concerned about video quality, just use your phone. People often ask me, what about my audio? I don't have a fancy microphone set up. Well, if you're Matthew, you want a really nice microphone setup. But if you're me and just participating in a web call or a Zoom play reading or a panel, your microphone on your computer is more than adequate, as long as you make sure you're directly facing it and you're no more than 3 feet away. Otherwise, a wireless microphone or a headset might be a good option for you, but you don't have to go out and buy something expensive to sound good on Zoom. I'm just using my web microphone, and it's totally fine for this purpose. People always ask me, does lighting matter? I'm a lighting designer. Yes, lighting matters. But again, you don't have to go crazy. My room is an example of what not to do, maybe as an artist. I have a really bright light behind me. I have a distracting background. I'm not the most evenly lit, but a $50 ring light, a $25 ring light off Amazon will do you a world of good. Again, you don't have to go crazy. If you're gonna invest in the lighting equipment, I would recommend that you look for equipment that says tunable white. That means you can change the color temperature. I'm gonna demonstrate that right now. You'll notice that my face is gonna change color slightly. You can see that. This is an example of a tunable white light here. So I have warm and I have cool, which reads a little bit more blue because I have another light in my room. So if you're gonna invest the money, invest in a tunable white one so that you can match the surroundings of your room. But keep all your lights on, make your background look nice. Lighting is easy, you just gotta think about it. I made a list of 10 things to remember that I think are common questions I also get asked when planning a live event. The number one thing is make sure you run all of your pre-recorded content ahead of time. We actually had that issue on our seminar today where we discovered that one of our computers can't run a video screen share very well. And we tested that ahead of time to know, is it too loud? Is it too quiet? Do you need the artist to rebalance the color? Make sure your content is sized appropriately. If you're streaming on YouTube, then you're gonna want something in 16:9. That's the standard size for most web streaming. But remember, Instagram is a square. So if you create rectangular content and put it on Instagram, there's a chance you're gonna miss the side of your content. For a visual artist, this could be really problematic. If you're gonna use overlays, like for the logos and the branding that I showed in my OBS demonstration, transparent PNG files that you make in Photoshop or get a friend to make for you work the best because they can overlay and they don't look super blocky. Happy to talk more about that, but something that we found out the hard way. Make sure you have a neutral image that you can switch to should your content fail. Someone's internet breaks down, your pre-recorded content starts lagging or skipping, something you can pop to in the stream that is on point but isn't gonna cause problems. Really helpful to buy yourself time. This is really important, and I've seen a lot of people, even my students at Carnegie Mellon, struggle with this. If you're using music that's not your music and you stream to a platform like YouTube, it will get flagged and taken down, even on a live stream, once they realize you're doing it. So if you're playing a Drake track and you don't have the rights to it, then your Drake track will disappear from your live stream. And so make sure that you're using royalty-free music or you have the rights to play what you're playing. It's super disappointing to put all that work into it and then get it taken down because it's a pop song. Make sure that all of your live participants check their framing and lighting. As simple as close your closet door, please. Or you have trash on your behind you. Like, you know, if I were doing my stuff here, I would say, this is very messy and distracting. And so just taking 5 minutes at the top of your presentation to make sure that's really people's spaces are clean. Have a check rehearsal, make sure people know when it's time to talk, when it's not time to talk. Make sure you do a mic check. Is everyone close enough to the mic? Does anyone sound muffled? The last sort of really important thing to say is if you're live streaming something like a Zoom call, there will be a delay of about 15 seconds between what you say on the Zoom call and when it shows up on YouTube. The delay for Facebook is between 7 and 9 seconds. So it's good advice to not have your participants watching the Zoom call, watching the live stream, because they're going to hear themselves 15 seconds delayed. Just trust your internal timing in your event and realize that your audience will see things 15 seconds later. I think that's it. This was a very technical conversation. I hope it was a little bit helpful to some people. Happy to answer more questions. Thank you, Kelly.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for that very informative presentation. I can tell that you teach for a living. We will definitely share Mary Ellen's top 10 things to keep in mind, as well as her PowerPoint, as well as this recording. So if you're feeling like that was a lot of information and you want to revisit later, please do not worry. I want to ask Mary Ellen, if there's anyone that is sort of, after watching that, feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed. This is not something I feel like I have the capacity to do. This scares me. Technology scares me. What is your message to those people? Because I feel like I was in that boat when we first started this conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's actually much easier than it seems. And that's why I tried to show you the videos, to show you that it actually is pretty intuitive. I wouldn't be afraid of it. You don't need to use OBS to live stream a Zoom. There are other ways to do that sort of thing. I mean, OBS is the easiest program I know, and it's free, which is amazing. You know, you don't have to pay any money to learn how to do it. I saw a question in the chat. There are tutorials. It's easy, but I think just give yourself, you know, a day or a week to get comfortable. But I also didn't know how to do this before I started. I taught myself how to do all of this. And granted, I am a lighting designer, so I'm used to working with a computer program to control my lights. But I think it's doable. My information is available. I'm happy to have a chat with anybody who's feeling unsure. But Kelly and I did it together, you know? We did it as partners. And so it can be really helpful to have someone in your corner who's willing to help you figure it out. So I know it sounds like a lot and I know it's daunting, but it's easier than it seems. And again, I'm happy to be a resource that people want to know, because I just want people to understand that this can be something that even the smallest organization can do and do well.
Yeah, I mean, we really did this with the exception of that $100 we spent for the closed captions. If we didn't do closed captions, we spent $0, and it was you and I figuring this out. It was really pretty minimal lift in terms of like financial capacity. Thank you, Mary Ellen. So appreciate that. I want to transition to give you all a sense of the artist's perspective in this, and turn it over to Matthew, who's going to talk about, as someone who received the Queen's Arts Fund and the Artist Commissioning Program grant to do a in-person performance. All of a sudden, COVID happened, and we had to have this conversation of, okay, well, what does this performance look like online? How can we transition this and still create something that you are excited about, that we can share with a larger audience? So I want to turn over to Matt, who's going to walk you through how he thought about this as an artist and how you all can think about this as creatives as well.
Hi all. Thanks so much. I guess I just want to start by saying that everything I'm going to say is sort of just based on my own personal experience. You know, as Mary Ellen said, there are always a million ways of doing things. But then, and also including input from colleagues and friends. You know, I know a lot of musicians, and in terms of transitioning from sort of traditional venues to online production, the sort of general consensus right now seems to be that that the pandemic pushed us into a future that we were actually already moving towards. Most people are very online these days, and the traditional lines between social internet and production and art and real life, and all those lines were already starting to blur. So, but even now, as you know, as the vaccine is finally coming out and everything, no one I know is thinking that everything is going to go back to the way it was. The online productions are not going to go away. All the artists and musicians I know are getting green screens, and they're getting lights, and they're doing everything they can to sort of get caught up and set up a little corner of their apartment or whatever, so that they can make these things happen. So, and then it's some of what I'm going to say is going to echo what Mary Ellen has already talked about, but that's partly on purpose. In sort of preparing this workshop, we sort of had a couple of key points we wanted to make sure we're coming across, and the question of which platform is a very important one. As Mary Ellen mentioned, you know, for me, audio is extremely important. For a visual artist, the visual quality is probably going to be more important, and et cetera, et cetera. Zoom is obviously the major player, but there are actually a lot of options out there. Some people are doing concerts on Twitch. There are other just things that are kind of like Zoom, like Whereby. I actually quite like their audio quality is better. And I'm not going to go into a whole list of things because I'm just not qualified. But look around. It sort of depends. Also, how much interactivity you want is a very important question to ask. And the number of people involved, both on your end and on the other end. If it's just you and you're expecting thousands of audience members, that's one thing. If you have a production team of 10 people and coordinating, and you're performing only for your mom, that's cool, but you might want to use a different, you know, set of tools for that. One of the ways, there are some ways that online productions are different, and some ways that they're the same from traditional. My general feeling is that online production should probably be shorter. It's very, very different experience to like go to a theater and sit down and know that, all right, I'm entering into this thing, I am going to experience this thing. That is so different from an audience that's looking at a screen. We're so used to screens they're everywhere, they're different kinds, and we all do a lot of different things on them. They're just sort of innately more distracting than a theater or a concert hall or even an arena or anything. It's just, it's more tiring. And you probably want to have less downtime too, because again, the distraction thing, people are used to being distracted in front of their screens, and you need to keep that in mind. And of course, the audience might be chatting too, which, as Kelly mentioned, is a very cool thing that you can do now. But it's also something to keep in mind in terms of, well, actually, Kelly the other day used a great phrase, which was the hierarchy of senses when looking at a screen. And this is sort of the idea is that, like, we're sort of trained in looking at screens, and obviously everyone's experience is different. And, you know, plenty of people with different kinds of abilities use screens, but the general thing is that the visual is foremost. And So like usually in movies and TV and such, like the music is in the background and the visual is in the foreground. And then if there's any speaking, if there's any talking, that's also going to be above the music. Now, obviously, some people are different. A lot of people pay a lot of attention to soundtracks, and it's no shade on quality of soundtracks or anything like that. That's just kind of how these things are made. And it's worth keeping that in mind when everyone's looking at their screen. If you, like me, want people to pay attention to the audio, you have to be very careful about what kind of visuals you put in front of them. If the visuals are too distracting, or if there's too much talking or something like that, the music is going to disappear, and because that's normal, if you know what I mean, in most movies and TV shows and such. So yeah, if you want them to pay attention to the music, you kind of have to make them pay attention to the music. Another way that online productions are different from the traditional ones is that you might want to keep in mind, if you have more than one person involved on your team, you want to be very clear about what everyone's role is going to be during the actual final production, during the stream or whatever form it takes. What specific tasks people are going to have and who's going to be in charge of what. And it's easy to overlook this because, well, it's like in real life, in like traditional productions, what people do is sort of very, very much based on long-standing roles and traditions that have been around for ages and everything. And it tends to be everyone sort of slips into what their job is and everyone knows how it's going to work. But right now with online productions, as we've talked about several times, there are like a million different ways to do it. And so you want to make sure that everyone knows exactly what their role is, and you know who is going to be looking at the chat and who is not going to be looking at the chat, and make sure that everyone's on the same page about that stuff. But a lot of things are the same as any other production. Things like know your audience, have a sense of who you're trying to communicate with, and rehearse. I feel like it's sometimes a little tempting to think of, since we are all doing like this social stuff often, with you know, over Zoom or just chatting or texting or whatever. I think it's easy to think, well, we're just going to do that kind of thing, but we're going to do art, which, you know, is technically what you're doing. But I guess what I mean is that don't forget to rehearse. That's just personal advice. What can I say? Another way to think about how the online production is going to be the same as traditional ones is that from the very beginning, from the idea all the way through the actual production, you're going to be making a series of decisions, all of which are going to inform the final project. And that's just the way it is making art. You know, we were talking the other day about how there's sometimes this, it's not really a trope. What is it? A tendency to talk about artists as being, you know, like, oh, the visionary artist, like they wake up in the middle of the night and they see the movie and then it's just a matter of getting the money and making the movie. And it's not how art works. You're always making a series of decisions, and every one of those decisions actually changes the idea. And that's always been true. But it's very obviously true when you're working in what is essentially a new form. And online productions are a new form. And a lot of the sort of habits and what is normal and what is expected is still being worked out. I think, Mary Ellen, if you could get the clip ready, I'm going to set it up, but Mary Ellen very kindly is taking the technical side of playing my clip. So this is going to be like a 2-minute clip from my project, The Oldest Takeout in Queens. And I want to set it up a little bit to give you an idea of what to look for, and some of the decisions that I made in terms of in putting it together. So again, there were 18 movements. Almost all of them took place in a kitchen, the same kitchen, my brother-in-law's kitchen, in fact. We had 2 iPhones, and so every scene was filmed from 2 different angles, which then could be edited. And then just as a reminder, that every movement was featured a different language. So this clip is going to be from the Serbian movement. Let's see what, so things to look out for. We decided not to actually use, even though it takes place in a restaurant and almost every scene involves cooking, we decided to not actually use any real food. And it just had this little bit of mime sort of that put in, and we just set that up from the beginning. We're not actually cooking, not a cooking show. And I think that was smart, because it was tempting to actually kind of make it a cooking show. But both in the process of writing it and then finally filming it, it was just like, yeah, that's not what we're doing. The original idea, one of the original ideas for doing it live was there was going to be a bookshelf with a phrase book for each of the language, and then she would grab the phrase book for each new language. For this filming, we decided to just have one book that just was a magic phrase book, and every time she opened it, she could look up whatever language was being spoken, and it was kind of fun. And then it's actually a music textbook. And so if you look closely, like you can see, it's actually filled with a lot of music, which we just thought was a funny joke. There's the person you're going to see, the singer, who's also the actor, so we recorded all the music first. And then when we did the filming, we decided that we weren't going to lip sync. This was possible because there's only one actor, so there's no confusion about who's doing the singing, and that also allowed her to concentrate on the acting, as opposed to trying to memorize and lip sync along with all these different languages, which is a tall order. And then also it was far easier technically too. I won't go into it, but there are all sorts of technical issues if you're going to try to play the sound into the room, and then also you have to edit it all together and blah, blah, blah. So, and then I guess the other thing about that is that I already, in addition to writing it and recording it, during the filming, I was doing the lighting. I was also running the cameras, and I was the director. And I was at that point when we were setting up, I was just like, I want to try to get rid of some of my jobs. It was just the 2 of us doing at the filming. We're married, so it was all, safe, and we didn't need to socially distance. So the one other thing to keep in mind in this is that the project goes over about 100-year time span. So each movement represents a different time. So you'll see there's a phone in there, and that's one of the ways we represented time. Was we got a bunch of different phones. We have phone from 1910, 1930, 50, 60, 90, 98, 2000, and 2003, and an iPhone. And as time went by, the phone updated. And then we, in post-production, we did some color filtering to just sort of represent the time. So in this scene, the Serbian scene takes place sometime in the 50s. And the color filtering that we did, it just sort of suggests black and white TV without actually being in black and white. That's kind of what we were going for. And the last thing I just wanted to reiterate, subtitles, the closed captioning. Mary Ellen mentioned it before. For my piece, probably, obviously, because of all the languages, it was very necessary to have it. But it's becoming, for online content, it's really becoming the norm to have subtitles, closed captioning of some kind. Not only because people are experiencing it on all sorts of different screens, from small phones to big TVs, etc. And a lot of people aren't even necessarily checking in on the audio fully, or maybe it's entirely muted. So it's a good idea to have the words either up there as subtitles or can be turned on with closed captions. But then also just for accessibility, they're just one of the wonderful things about online content is that it's more accessible to more and more people around the entire world than a lot of other traditional forms of production. So yes. So I guess let's play the clip. Thanks, Marilyn.
All right, let me know that it works. Here we go.
Zdravo.
Zdravo. Ovaj restoran je pun, neće biti dugo. Mogu li ti pomoći?
Gladan sam. Ja sam žedan.
Šta želiš da pojećeš? Današnji specijalitet je sve je plavo i sljano.
Jaja.
I jaja, plavo i sljano.
Picu.
Picu. Kakvu frostu picie?
Sa povrćem.
Male ili veliki?
Mali molim.
Ah, mali moli.
Mali molim.
Šta želi da popijete?
Imate li sveže mleko?
Plavo i slano.
Hvala vam.
I zadovoljstvo moje.
Kako si?
Veoma dobro.
Svet se menja.
Svet se menja. Da li si uplašen?
Da li si uplašen? Da li si uplašen?
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Am I back on? Great, thank you. So yeah, I guess the last, I had two other things I wanted to say. Is that when I went into all to tell you about the detail about the decisions we made about the production and everything, and because I'm a big believer that limitations are your friend. It's actually kind of nice to give yourself a frame to work within. And again, and then in that thing I was saying before of that you're making a series of decisions, all of which lead up to what your final project is actually going to be. Like a lot of the character in the piece that we ended up making developed from what we couldn't do. And there were a lot of things in the final product that we hadn't planned on, but it was just, it just had to happen the way it did. And then ended up having this sort of very unique feel to it, to the whole production that was not at all what I had envisioned when I first proposed the project to the QCA as a live performance. And once you sort of accept that is happening, that you have to make these decisions and it's going to change the piece, it actually makes it becomes exciting. It makes it kind of fun because, well, you can decide for yourself why it is. It is. And I guess the other thing is there's a sort of a silver lining to making art during COVID, in that a lot of this online production stuff, I mean, this is brand new. there are very few standards. People are using all sorts of different tools and applications and different websites and different streaming services and different approaches and different levels of interactivity. There are no norms right now. So if you do actually do some sort of online production, you are actually taking part in the conversation about what is going to be normal, what are we going to do in the future, what is going to feel comfortable to people and what is going to feel uncomfortable people. You get to be part of that conversation, and that's kind of cool. I think we're going to have a Q&A at the end if you have any questions.
Thank you, Matt. That's a perfect place to leave it, that you could be part of constructing the new normal. And I love seeing that clip again. If people want to check out the full production of The Oldest Takeout in Queens, I'll drop the link in the chat. And I think that your piece, for me, like watching it again, really elucidated something Mary Ellen said, which was that you made deliberate artistic decisions, that you intentionally dialed back the visuals so that people would focus on the music. And that, I think the clip you chose was pretty dynamic, but for the most part, the audience was just viewing the kitchen. But it didn't feel stagnant because the focus was on the dynamic dialogue and the audio. So cool, thank you for sharing. As a time check and sort of a update for everyone, have a little bit of content. We're gonna go to 7:30. And since we're running a little bit over, we're still going to take questions at the end, and we'll just stay about 10 minutes later. And so if anyone has questions, don't fear, we'll be ready to take them at 7:30. So this is the part where I'm going to transition back to sharing my screen. I don't want to leave this, or rather have you all leave this workshop without discussing how to think about contingency planning specifically for your Queen's Art Fund project. So in an environment where the format of your arts event is uncertain, how do you go about thinking about planning and contingency planning? And specifically, if you're applying to the Queen's Art Fund, which I know many of you are, how should you think about filling out this contingency plan question? So for those of you who aren't familiar, this year we are asking applicants to answer this question, which is, should there be a resurgence of COVID in New York City or New York State? Essentially, what's your game plan? How will this affect your programming? What's your plan to shift programming to accommodate? And so in essence, put together, you have 200 words to do this. Put together a few tips from QCA staff and panelists about how to think about this. First, as Mary Ellen and Matt had talked about, thinking about how bringing your events online isn't just as simple as doing the same thing online, but it has its own sort of unique creative structure, abilities, and things that are not feasible. So thinking through what makes sense for a digital structure may be different than what works in person. As always, be thoughtful and propose something feasible, something that you are capable of executing, something that you have the people power in place to execute, or any other resources you might need. Set a timeline and define the circumstances in which your contingency plan should go into effect. So what I mean by this, I'll give an example that I think about as a program manager. We transitioned our high school to art school program to online. And at a certain point, we kept saying, oh, well, if things clear up, then we'll be able to do this program in person. And it gets to the point where at some point, you just have to call it. You have to say, okay, it might be better in 2 months, but we don't know. I need to just be conservative and plan to do this program online so that I can move forward. And that was something that was helpful for me that I think might be helpful for you as artists. Like at some point, you just got to call it, make a plan, and move forward. If you do make the decision to go virtual and be conservative, even though who knows, things might be better, but they might not, that's okay. Jenna, my colleague, who's the program manager at Queen's Art Fund, who's on this call as well, is understanding of that, and she's been doing a lot of approving contingency plans, knowing that people need to, at some point, just make the call to go virtual if need be. Finally, thinking about some of the silver linings of virtual programming, like greater audience reach. I mean, just the fact that there's 50-something people on this call tonight on a Tuesday talking about contingency planning is amazing. And something that happens when you do these online events is you have amazing documentation that is accessible to anyone in the world. We are having people dial in to our programs from all over the world, and we're a small borough arts council in Queens, and so there are some positives to this crazy world we're in. I am going to very quickly go over some digital platforms for showcasing visual arts. As a visual artist myself, and as someone who's had to think through this for exhibiting visual arts programs, I just wanted to share some resources, share some research that I've done that I found helpful. Again, we'll circulate this after the fact, so if I go really quickly, don't worry. Some virtual exhibition platforms I found helpful. Art Steps, we use this to do a virtual exhibition for our high school to art school program. It's a free interactive virtual gallery platform. So you can use pre-programmed ready-made exhibition spaces. You can create your own virtual spaces for free. So the one picture here is modeled after QCA's forthcoming space. That was important to us because we wanted to make participants feel like they're in a particular place. It's not perfect, but it's free. It's relatively easy. The only downside was that you can't customize the URL, but I think it's a good option if you want to save money and customize your own space. Another virtual exhibition platform I looked into is called Exhibit. I think it's a good option if you want to do something free or low cost for temporary exhibits. So if you want to do a 2-week exhibition, you can get a free trial and it's totally free and easy to use. Or if you want to have it up for a month, if you choose certain galleries, it's only like $15 a month. So you can do a really sophisticated looking virtual exhibition for $30 max, say. I would say if you don't want a pre-made space, if you're good with ready-made exhibition spaces, I'd recommend this one over Art Steps just because it's a little bit more intuitive to use. Another really kind of fancy exhibition platform are 3D scanned exhibitions. So this is a way to get really detailed. You can really zoom in on specific works. This screenshot is from Plaxall Gallery in Long Island City. I'm sure many of you are familiar with. They have a demo on their website that's linked here. Again, we'll circulate this after the fact, but it's essentially taking a 3D scan of a physical space. So keep in mind that you will need to physically set up an exhibit in the real world and then hire someone or have it 3D scanned. There is a contact that's provided here of someone a local Queens artist that will do this for about $400. So again, not crazy cheap, but if it's something that if you want to invest in creating compelling and evergreen documentation for a digital exhibition, it could be worth it depending on what your budget is. Some tips and best practices that I found in researching this for visual exhibitions, establishing guide points to help viewers navigate the space. So you're not just dropping them into digital ether, but you kind of hit play, or you can sort of structure viewers' experience to help them navigate the virtual space. Again, leaning into the virtual medium, choosing works and artists that make sense in this format. Videos are great, for example. Even if it's a virtual exhibition, that doesn't mean you can't schedule it to be live, that it's going to happen. We're going to have a virtual opening on Friday from 6 to 8. That way you can market it like a live component and do things like ask artists to speak about their works or do a live walkthrough to make it feel a little bit more engaging. Can include interactive materials. Like one thing we did is ask our artists to record audio of them speaking about the piece and then embed the MP3 or written description is a nice way to personalize it. Fundraising tip would be that we did was get sponsors to sponsor the exhibition and put their logo quote on the wall just as a way to fundraise. Have a couple sources linked as to where I got this information and best practices, including a nice podcast from Hyperallergic on the topic. And I think I just got through all of that, and we are ready to take questions. So I'm going to end my screen. And again, we'll stick around for 10 minutes. If anyone has questions for Mary Ellen, for Matt, for myself, we also have my colleague Jenna London from QAF. online if you have questions about writing that contingency plan for the Queen's Art Fund. So I'm going to open it up to everyone. If you want to drop your question in the chat, we'll take questions in order. Okay, I'm going to read the questions as they come in for panelists, and then you all can just jump in. So I Love asks, Mary Ellen, having watched endless YouTube videos to figure out the process of going virtual, are there any videos or other resources that you found helpful and would recommend?
Yes and no. I would say that in terms of learning the software, I actually found there's a YouTube channel there's tutorial videos that OBS has that I think are really helpful in terms of learning that software. In terms of looking at what virtual events are successful, I've watched a lot of virtual events during this pandemic time. And I think that I tend to watch everything I can get my hands on to figure out what's working, like what's too long to hold my attention, what's not really helpful. The first virtual art piece that I saw that really struck me as super effective was Eleanor Bishop's performance of The Seagull with Theatre Auckland, which came out at the very beginning of the pandemic, which I thought was a really good, very early understanding of how does Zoom work for performance and what is effective and what isn't. But otherwise, really the tutorials that the software companies put out themselves, I've found to be the most helpful. I've been working on learning Isadora as a way to hack Zoom, for instance, if people are interested in that sort of thing. And I've been watching the Isadora YouTube channel, which has been really helpful. But it's a really good question. I sort of asked a lot of people because I have a lot of friends in the video world as well. But maybe I should think about that and send a list out or something and see if I can think of some particular videos that I thought have been really helpful.
Great, thanks, Mary Ellen. Another question from I Love for Matt. They say, your suggestions on things to keep in mind, i.e. lengths of shows, etc. Do you have any thoughts or considerations on producing cabaret performances, solo shows, or a combination of both?
I don't think I can get too specific just because that's a little, I don't have much experience in that. But off the top of my head, the first thing I thought of was the last cabaret sort of style show that I saw before lockdown. And it was extremely fun, but it was quite interactive. You know, we in the audience, we had a few drinks, a lot of the songs were a little bawdy, and we ended up being a lot of back and forth. And obviously that cabaret can mean a million different things, but the first thing I thought of is you probably want to use some format that allows for some kind of interactivity. Now, if you're performing live, you probably don't want to be reading a chat while you do it. So maybe you want to set up some other thing, or maybe you do, or maybe you integrate the reading the chat into how you're performing. I think regarding and solo shows, I think that kind of thing is the fewer people that are performing, the easier that is. Unless you literally have one person like whose role is to perform and then the other person whose role is to interact, which some people do. So I don't know if that helps at all, but that's something to think about.
Thanks, Matt. I would just add to, I was really of the mind that you said earlier that you're sort of the mind that virtual shows should be generally, as a rule, shorter than in-person shows. And I was completely 100% agree when I first started this. And then we had one of your ACP artists colleagues wanted to do a 2-hour world premiere. And my first thought as program manager was like, I don't think that's going to work. I think people, are going to lose attention span. Let's do something shorter. And we ended up going for it. And it was so compelling. It works just based on the way that he structured the content. It's online won't say too much about it, but it was just very fast paced, a lot of visuals, a lot of content to keep you engaged, and it worked great. So, every rule is meant to be broken, and this is not a one size fits all. Even sort of these like general rules of thumbs or what feels like common sense that we're sketching out really just depends on what you're doing and what your content's like.
If I could jump back in, I totally agree with you. And I mean, I think we all know that one of the beautiful things about art is that the minute you try to define it or make a rule regarding it, someone will break it and it will be brilliant. And that's one of the reasons we have art. Don't get me started. But yeah, like with that project, but I think the fact that you and we all were sort of collaborating in a bit with those projects, the fact that there was concern about the length and that might be too long, that then became something that was discussed and something that he then very much thought about while he was planning it. And so, like you say, it totally worked. But also because it was the talking point, I think really helped. Like we need to be careful,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I would also add one more thing, because we talk a lot about this at school, because our students are doing online productions, and they range in terms of like music video style to more of an interactive art gallery to theatrical productions, music performances. It is true that if you are making something online pre-recorded, it takes a little more time than you might think. So, if you're just going to record something and put it online, that's fine. But if you need to do editing, remember that if you take 10 hours of video, you then have to watch 10 hours of video to know what part of those 10 hours you want to put on your screen. So, don't shortchange that process, because I think that sometimes that can feel daunting. But very much agree with Kelly and Matthew that like generally people are saying, 35 minutes is a good way to shoot, but there are 2-hour productions that are fabulous. So.
Awesome. And I'm going to drop the full 2-hour production we're referring to in the chat. You could read more about that project or watch it if you're so inclined. Okay, next question for either Matt or Mary Ellen. For musicians or producers looking to collaborate virtually, is that possible at all in your opinion without latency being an issue?
I don't have any experience with this. I haven't done it myself yet, but I do have friends that are doing it, and it is possible. And there are there's software that's specifically designed for that. The reason I haven't done it is just honestly that my internet isn't good enough. You generally have to have very good internet and steady, and you generally I think pretty much always it will not work over Wi-Fi. You have to have plugged in. You have to have Ethernet plugged in to your very good internet. But I do know some musicians for whom it is working, and that the latency is low enough that they can actually play together from afar. So yes, it's possible. How it's possible is unfortunately for me, it's beyond me. I haven't done it.
I believe Mark Nunez actually put this in the chat, but Jack Trip is the one that I've heard about a lot of people using, Matt, which is a low latency software invented for, Aurora, thank you, Mark, yeah.
Yeah, I saw that in the chat.
Yeah, there's a couple other ones. There's been a lot of articles coming out about that. If you Google low latency music collaboration, you'll see, I think that's one of the reasons why, if you're not someone who's prepared to go down that road, thinking about pre-recording if possible is helpful for music events. I also want to say that thing, piggyback off something that Matthew just said about internet, which is that we live in a world of wireless internet, and wireless internet is amazing. But if you're considering doing a streaming event, you really need to plug your internet in. If there's a way for you to unplug your router and plug that cable into your laptop or whatever it is that you're streaming, it's going to make a world of difference, because that latency only increases the number of things you got to jump through. And so if you're the one, like when I was handling the streams, I was plugged into the wall because that was important for me. So anyone participating in an online event, I think, to try to decrease latency, Zoom has actually really low latency for what it is. Of course, it's not good enough for what your question is, the music collaboration. But there's a couple other things to note about this, which is, as we all know, in Zoom, you can't talk over other people. Sometimes the software will preference one voice over the other. So if you're looking to do something that involves sound in real time, you are gonna have to look elsewhere. And I would recommend Jacktrip as a place to start, because that's what I've heard the most about, but there are other softwares.
Thank you. Okay, I think we have time for one more question. There's a couple that are visual arts related, so I'm just going to combine those. So Lisa Wade asks, how long is too long for a gallery exhibit? And we had another question that asked, what have you seen working best for a purely visual art show? Do you think a curator walkthrough video is good to accompany? So I'll take this since it's visual arts related. I think in terms of length, it's less relevant in that you can simulate a very large gallery experience with lots of individual works, and I think that's fine and great if you wanted to do a large group show. I think when you're thinking about length in the digital format, it has more to do with the presentation style. So by that, I mean, are you going to do a live gallery opening? In which case, you know, length is about, is that an hour long? Is it 2 hours long? Or are you doing something pre-recorded that you're sharing? I think that the appetite in terms of length for like a live event is longer because people feel like they're with you in the space. So for example, for our high school to art school program, we did a 2-hour opening where we did a walkthrough, we did conversations with the artist and so on, and people had the appetite for that because it feels more like an event. But when I share the recording afterwards, if people didn't show up to the event the day of, they're not watching a 2-hour recording of it alone later online. So I think if you're sharing pre-recorded content, I think short snippets are great for social media. Like I would share a 2-minute walkthrough of the gallery. So there's different ways to structure it, I think, that can be dynamic, but I think you can get away with including a lot of works if that's what you're interested in doing. And then in terms of best practices for a visual arts show and the curator walkthrough, I think it's a great idea. When I was researching and reading articles, I heard that it was helpful, as I said before, to structure the experience. So you're not just dropping someone in a virtual gallery and say, check this out. Like that works in person because you're able to freely move in a space and that's fun and you have autonomy. But I was just reading that people found it helpful to have a little bit of guidance. And so having a curator walk people through the space and share the screen is great. Maybe they do that pre-recorded and you share it. Or maybe, you know, there's guide points like, and you click at number 1 and it takes you here. You click at number 2, it takes you there. And you could even upload audio from that curator. So if people want to hear more about that work, they just hit play and there it is. Okay, so I am going to wrap up. Thank you all for being here. Before you sign off, I just want to say that we are going to have a follow-up discussion on February 25th, a creative conversation that sort of picks up where we left off. Let me pull this up. Here we go. So creative conversation on February, sorry, that should say 25th, not 15th. February 25th from 6 to 7:30, where we invite you to hopefully apply what you've learned in this workshop and share how it's going for you. Join a discussion of individuals that are navigating this question of how to showcase their work online. You can talk about how it's working for you, how it's not working for you, and solicit feedback from a group of artists. Unlike this session, it's not going to be us talking. It won't be presentational. The goal is really to have a fun, informal conversation about these issues and get to know each other a little bit more. And so if you're someone that has done this and things have worked well, or you want to share, or even just talk through these ideas with fellow Queens artists and creatives, would love for you to come out. We'll send a link for you to RSVP in a follow-up email tomorrow after the session. So with that, just want to say thank you all so much for being here. Thank you so much to our 2 fabulous panelists. It was just really an incredible overview. And again, we'll circulate all of this information in a follow-up.
Thank you, and thanks for the good questions, y'all. Best of luck.
Bye, everyone. Good evening. Have a good night.